nightmare.
Hello and welcome to Cinema Subculture, where we discuss everything strange, obscure and downright messed up in the world of movies. My name's Gary.
Ho, ho, ho. So, Gary, what on this very special Christmas special for 2021, what are we going to be discussing tonight?
Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 is a 1987 Christmas slasher film directed by Lee Harry. Following on from the events of Part 1, Ricky Freeman, the younger brother of Billy, recounts his childhood to a psychiatrist after being incarcerated for murder. Taking place on December the 24th, this experience provokes Billy into escaping prison to go on another violent rampage.
Jesus. And that sounds quite interesting. That sounds quite formulaic for a slasher film, you would say. Gary, remind me, have we ever spoke about the first film in this series?
We have.
Yeah,
so.
back in the old podcast days, was it?
Yeah.
Might be considered a wee Easter egg on the end of, was it the Christmas Evil episode we did?
I believe it was, yeah. Christmas Eve,
we
Black
did
Christmas, Christmas Evil.
That's
double
right.
feature.
Yeah, it was a triple feature, really, wasn't it? Because we had a wee
Triple.
post-credits. We're going a bit MCU, getting a wee post-credits scene there. So if anyone fancies listening to our thoughts on that film, go back and listen to that. So I had seen this film quite a few times. I'm a big fan of the first one. Actually watched it again pretty recently. What did you think of this film, Gary?
It's fun enough. It's fun enough, isn't it? You've got a fun performance by Eric Freeman. Unfortunately, the film suffers from a lazy 40 minutes of recounting the scenario of the first part of the film. So the first half an hour, you basically just get Ricky telling you what happened in the first one from his perspective. Now, I did read an interesting nugget about why that happened, but I think superficially, it's kind of a bit lazy. I mean, to take entire chunks of the first movie and just give you them, just watch this again. You're thinking there, I've seen this, why am I rewatching exactly the same thing? But Freeman gives like a kind of over the top kind of Jack Nicholson inflected performance. It's got some cracking quotes, but I mean, I didn't hate it. It was fine. It's fine. But I'm not rushing back to see it again.
No. You need to remind me in a sec what your thoughts were on the first one. I'm sorry to jump in there and kind of cut you off. As is tradition, I'm drinking during this Christmas special, so please forgive any what's the word I'm looking for? Excitement. So yeah, the I don't know what the backstory you've read on this film is, but the gist of it that I've got is the original film had such a backlash with the whole killer Santa thing, right? There was a lot of protests and kids and parents and stuff like that out, like saying that they'd ruined Santa for the children and stuff like this, and basically besmirching a treasured character. So the original film really didn't get very long in theaters. They pulled it quite quickly. So the people that owned the rights to distribute it went to Lee Harry, who is the director of this film. He was an editor, just an editor who worked at a post house, and said, we need to recut this film into a different film and get it back in cinemas to try and make some of the money back, right? We need to get this back out there. Can you have a look at this and see what we can do? So he had a look at it, watched the film, and they kind of came up with this plan that they would need to, to be able to do it, they wanted to have some sort of framing, mechanism. They thought about doing like voiceover only and a bunch of different things, which was quite traditional at the time with doing recuts on these types of films. But the distributor, the executive producer, Lawrence Applebaum, he said that they could have, I think it was $100,000, something like that, right? $100,000. And I think they had between 5 and 7 days. I can't quite remember. There was 5 days with Eric Freeman, and then I think 7 days total. And they had, I think, 40 minutes new footage that they decided to film. So that's where the kind of the idea of reusing and and cutting back and forth between the original film and having Ricky telling this story came from. So I think that when you look at that and what they kind of got and the kind of cult status that this film has for all the kind of reasons that they just didn't have any time or any money, like there's things where like near the end there's a beheading of a character, and it's a bloodless beheading, right? And the reason it's bloodless is because they just found someone's house that they would let them use it, and they didn't have a spare piece of carpet to put down or anything to cover, to do anything with. So they had blood there, but if they'd used it, it would have ruined these people's carpet who'd let them use the house for free, right? So it was that kind of, we just have to do it this way, I guess, right? Because there's no time. So I think, yeah, it's a kind of, apparently it was quite a common thing to do these types of recut. I don't know about like reshooting more footage. I haven't seen many like this. But I think that's all part of its kind of charm and has kept it kind of relevant in the kind of the spheres of kind of really, like, so bad it's good kind of films. As for Eric Freeman's performance, I mean, it goes full. For me, it reminded me of you might not know this guy or know the reference, but do you remember like Tommy the Green Ranger from Power Rangers?
Right.
Do you ever see that? No,
I don't know.
When he first turns up, he's an evil character, right? And this arc, like 5-episode arc, and he's this evil character. And wow, he's so arch, and he really does this kind of laugh, right? And it just, this Eric Freeman like performance just reminded me of everything that just is so like comedic about that performance. But I really need to ask you one question. Have you ever seen a person act so much with their eyebrows?
Right.
Like every line that he delivers, his eyebrows pop up and down like I mean seismometer. Don't know what as if there's an earthquake going on. But yeah, like some of his lines and some of his delivery and some of the dialogue is just like, wow. I like, do you still dream, Ricky, or something? Do you have bad dreams, Ricky? I don't sleep. Right. Like, I mean, and I mean, I think I performed it better there than he did in the film. Do you remember what your thoughts were in the first film? I feel like you thought it was okay, but you weren't that. You thought it was fine. Again, like kind of probably. I mean, it was better than this, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think it was decent. Could have done better with the concept. I think I remember saying something about like there was the possibility of a killer Santa running about at Christmas time. That was like quite a interesting potential for a visual set piece. Like I don't know, like a Santa running into like a mass group of other Santas or something like that. But it didn't seem to maybe capitalise on that. But
sure.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of think of this film on its own merits because it obviously a third of the film is the first film, so
I know,
it's quite an anomaly.
And it kind of cuts a lot of, like, for me personally, some of my favourite bits of the first film. When I think of Saturday Night Deadly Night, I always think of that scene where they go to see the grandpa at the beginning, and he like frightens the shit out of the little boy, like about Santa, right? And that's just cut completely from the flashbacks in this one. And I was just thinking there when you were talking about it, I think it's like I don't know if you know much of the. Like, I've not seen many episodes, right? But the Mystery Science Theater 3000,
right? No,
the guys, they do the kind of like they do like kind of a riff tracks type of thing. They basically make fun of a film almost as they're watching it, kind of thing, and pull it apart. This kind of reminds me, or I think should be taken a little bit more in that vein, where it's kind of a commentary on. What they'll try to do is like some sort of comedic, winking eye commentary on the original film. I was listening to a discussion with the director whereby he detested the first film. He thought it was, what they'd done was very, like, he didn't like all the violence and stuff like that, and the kind of, the gore, or there wasn't that much going. That the first one was a lot of it cut, but they kind of, he wanted to try and make something that kind of disarmed the original. He thought it was quite a mean film, the original, and quite bad-spirited for like a Christmas film, right? Even a Christmas horror film. But I think what he wanted to do was try and, as I say, make fun of it a little bit.
Right, okay.
The concept. I think that was where the kind of script came from. I think the performances push it over into something else, but I think that was the kind of, some of the like scenarios, that we're trying to kind of make a little bit lighter of the original film,
Right,
if that
okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, it says here on Wikipedia about the production that the filmmakers were told to re-audit the film and pass it off as a sequel, but director Lee Harry demanded that a new film be shot, although he did not have the budget to create an entirely new story. So I think you can.
I don't know if
is that?
yeah, okay.
Do you agree with that?
I don't. The demanded. I think he just was like kind of. He didn't think he could make anything
Right.
of it that would be a different film.
Right,
so
okay.
he kind of they come up with the idea. But yeah, that's basically it.
So yeah, now once I read that, I was like, okay, I can let them off the hook a wee bit, because it wasn't like maybe as, once you know that, you don't view it as cynically as this is as cynical a sequel you can get just by here's a bit of the first film.
I know that's why I think that's why it's like so kind of takes you back at first. You're like, wait a minute,
Right.
what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like,
but about the humour in that, what I think of there is it, for maybe like the first hour, it seems to have like, it does have a sense of humour about itself, like, but it has quite a kind of dry, kind of sarcastic sense of humour, and then until it goes a bit wacky in the last act once he goes on his rampage. But one of the things that stood out to me about thinking about when this was made, it feels quite like a 70s movie in a lot of ways to me, because it's quite gritty looking. It has a kind of seriousness to, even though it's got a sense of tongue-in-cheek quality about it, it still feels, I think it's maybe the score is quite sombre in the cinematography. It doesn't really sit well with the kind of humour you might see in a Friday the 13th. It feels quite very like different worlds. And that stood out to me like from 1987, although it does go kind of wacky, and I think the kills and things are quite silly, intentionally silly in the last act, but it did feel like a film from another era.
Yeah, and to me also, it's right from that opening. Like, to me, I mean, when you watch the original opening, which again I do, I watched it the other night in preparation for kind of doing this and stuff. I don't know, it really does resonate with me, and it really makes me feel weirdly Christmassy. I don't know, there's something about this 80s Christmas that just harkens back to when we were little, right? For me, all the kind of imagery and stuff. But the opening's quite kind of almost like a riff on the Halloween opening. There's like a kids singing a rhyme, and then you get the kind of Friday the 13th thing with the logo coming towards the screen and then blood splatter on the screen, right? Whereas this, it just kind of opens up on this kind of quite stark room with a foot, and that kind of score you're talking about with the piano, it's going to, it plays the note, and then it comes up and it's just Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, and it feels like a TV movie. Like, you know what I mean? It feels like a TV like sequel almost. And I was surprised to learn that it really was, like, when I learned all this, the history about the film, looking at it, that it was actually, made for and released in the cinema. Because it really just feels like something that was made for TV, in that kind of way that they used to do TV versions of, of big budget films to make them fit time slots almost. That this could have been done the same way, to just reuse that footage, right? And like, it was the TV company or TV channel that did the sequel, almost. Yeah, that was the kind of feeling I got from it, and because it is quite a cheap looking film. But yeah, it's definitely got like I think because also they were trying to match some of that footage that was in the first one in a way where they could anyway. I think that, and that was only 84, but even that in 84 felt like a slightly older film, I think. When I was watching that again, I felt like it didn't have a lot of the kind of slasher trope stuff that you were getting in Friday the 13th. Not trope. Well, yeah, I guess tropes, but there's more of a build up to that film. Like, we get the whole backstory about Billy and and Ricky with their parents being killed, and then up through the orphanage and stuff like that. There's more kind of characterization on the killer than anyone else. We don't see a bunch of victims go to a place and then they get picked off. It's more about the killer up through, and then he kind of gets unleashed on some random people who you've until that point really not met. So it's not got that same Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or even Halloween kind of trope in that way. So I think that might be why that with them trying to match that, and it kind of has this kind of TV feel for the, you know, so I think that all kind of adds to that kind of pre-80s slasher feel that you're maybe getting from it.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same kind of like the pace that we got from 80s slashers. Like the kill rate wasn't there. It feels more like, you know, something that's built around character, like a slightly the 80s cinema kind of moved away from a bit. It does feel a bit slow and sluggish, I think, pace wise.
It's interesting that you know, the even though that they were trying to get away from that whole, or there had been such a backlash to the first film with the Killer Santa thing, right? You could be mistaken in this film, and certainly, I mean, I've seen one of the sequels after this. I've seen part 3, which is actually stars Bill Moseley from Texas Massacre 2 and a bunch of Rob Zombie's films. But so, which has even less to do with this, but like, you know, getting away from the Killer Santa thing. So through watching this film, you might be like, okay, well, they're getting away from the whole Christmas thing completely, right? Because this isn't a Christmas. It's like a twisted It's a Wonderful Life, right? There's almost no Christmas until the very end of the film, even though the film, the Freeman film takes place on December 24th, right? There's no snow, you know, there's no Christmas imagery other than the flashbacks. And even when he goes on his first rampage, even though it's still technically a flashback, it's through a quite, I mean, it is filmed in like California, I believe, and probably set there as well. So it's very sunny streets, daytime. He's just wearing like some trousers and a blue jumper, you know. So it's interesting that they still did choose to go back with the Killer Santa thing. Even though I think they would have got away with it maybe not having the Killer Santa. But you know, they felt that it's interesting. They felt that even then they had to go back to the Killer Santa, given the kind of kickback they'd had in the first one. That was the whole reason that this was really being made, was because of the kind of, you know, pushback on the first one. Although he didn't have a beard,
right, okay.
So it could have been anyone just with Santa's costume on, and they did actually show him killing a Santa. So maybe that's what it is. It's like, see, children, watch this, children, pay attention. That's a murdered Santa there. Don't worry, that's not the real Santa killing people. He's dead.
Yeah, I think that they had to. I mean, that's the film's kind of only gimmick, isn't it? That it's a Killer Santa. I mean,
yeah, it is. I mean, but again, there are like, I think there's 5 of these films. And like part 3 has Bill Moseley picking up the Ricky role, even though he's barely in it. And then I think part 4 has a character called Ricky in it, played by Clint Howard. Right, and part 5 is just off. There's one called The Toy Maker. I think that might be 4 or 5. That has no Santa, you know. So it's just it. I think they were definitely trying to get away from it in some way, but you know, you just think, like, I suppose they already had the Killer Santa stuff in the flashbacks, I guess. So they that, you know, they had to probably bring it back in with Ricky. But anyway, it's just interesting the fact that that's kind of what they were trying to get away from. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I can usually watch one of these films around this time of year. I don't like to watch usually them both, and certainly not. I always have to watch the first one first, right? Because once you've watched the second one, you've seen the first one. So you're really kind of batting a dead horse there. But the first one for me is a genuine Christmas horror classic that I do want to watch every year. And this is it's kind of fun. I've seen it once with an audience. And even then, I think it was maybe a little bit of a letdown for me with the audience, like, because I had already seen it personally, and kind of had, you know, I think people maybe expect more from it being a so bad it's good film. I think maybe the time for this and it's kind of memeability has maybe, you know, there's a few scenes in this that are quite heavily present on the internet, like Garbage Day and things like this. You've probably seen the memes. But outside of that, it's quite, as you say, quite a slow film, and there's not a lot of that kind of high, you know, he's quite big in arch in his performance, and there's a lot of quite funny lines, but when you go to the old film, that kind of slows those bits down. You know, it's a really weirdly paced film because of that. It's a shame because if it had just been all him, I think, and more of that kind of carnage stuff, I think it would be easier to rewatch it, right? Like even if it was just really bad, like kind of overperforming, I think that would be you'd be able to go back to it easier because you're getting all that in a concentrated segment.
It feels like it's almost just on the line of being too well made to be a kind of so bad it's good. If it was a bit more sloppy, then maybe it would be more enjoyable for the for its rawness. Because I think the performance and the dialogue and that makes it like, oh, it's a fun, crazy, quotable kind of popcorn movie. But I think there's a difference between like this and like Zombie Flesh Eaters or something. I don't know, maybe the dubbing or the kind of I think a lot of the dialogue isn't quite there and like isn't bad enough like to be really give it that richness that those films have, that where we can like every line is just like laugh out loud because it's so ridiculous. It's a bit too naturalistic and a lot for a lot of it.
I don't know if I agree. I agree with what you're saying. I do agree, but I think it's kind of, it comes down to what I'm saying with the fact that it's so separated out. Yeah. Right. I think the deliveries and the dialogue are really bad and are up there with being like, so like, you know what I mean? I think it is, but I think because you get those breaks in between when it goes back to like a different film, it's for so long in the film, that makes it, because I've years ago I remember watching a supercut of just his lines from the interview, and it's all ridiculous, and every like that bit when he's just in the doctor's face like from the side, and it's like, and he goes, what was it he says, like he's like, am I going too fast for you, doc? And because he's looking around the room and he goes, red car, good point. And it's like and like when he grabs the aerial off the car after killing that guy near the end, and his girlfriend just goes, uh-oh. Like just like it's like, and the stuff in the cinema as well, like, you know, when they're watching the beginning of the first film, it's like with the Santa and stuff like that, it's just all kind of, because he goes, what did you say this film was about again? And she's like, it's about a guy dressed up as Santa and kills people. He's like, what? You know, it's just, I think it is because it's so separated with all the other stuff. But yeah, I think it would have been interesting to see a whole film that they'd made like a full, 90-minute feature, still a sequel, still about Ricky, just with maybe picking up from those last moments of the first film and then taking it forward in a similar fashion to what we get, really, because we do kind of get a similar, albeit like a more positive childhood upbringing for Ricky after the orphanage, like, right? So Billy goes there, and I mean, I always think this is such a kind of, I don't know, I always just think it's so stark, like what Billy goes through after that, like, his grandpa basically tells him Santa's going to get him, and then his parents get killed by Santa, and then he goes to an orphanage and then gets basically ridiculed for not liking Santa, and then like beat up and like punished and all this stuff, and then he gets made be Santa at his first job when he's 18, right? It's just this horrible life. Whereas Ricky, like we get in this film, we get him picking up being adopted by quite a nice family, and even like reacting when he sees the nuns and when he sees the Santa stuff and being very concerned and empathetic to what has happened to him. And then his adoptive father dies, and then he just goes off the rails, like, So having the film be more that, I think would have been quite interesting, and having it still in the same tone as the Freeman the Framing film, I think could have been quite a fun feature without having those kind of longer sessions of, oh, I just watched this. If you're watching, if you're doing a run in the series or something like that, I just watched this. This is kind of boring. Like, it's like,
that's what I did when I rewatched it there for the second time for this. I just skipped through everything for the part one, so I watched it in like 50 minutes or something.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, I know. I'd noticed it this time because I did watch the original first, and it's just like I was picking up the bits that they'd skipped over and stuff. It's kind of weird, the bits they do skip over, because you don't get any kind of why, you know, the fact that Billy doesn't, you know, is already aware of Santa because of what's happened with his grandpa and stuff. But yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird one, and it's weird that it has come to such like this cult frenzied status. Like there was a whole movement a while ago to find this guy Eric Freeman, who I think about 5 or 6 years ago they managed to get, or maybe a little bit more, they managed to finally track him down. And you know, he's been at conventions and stuff, but there was like a whole movement whereas Freeman, like, because no one knew where he was. You know, not the filmmakers, none of the fans had ever seen him at anything. And I think he was just kind of, he wasn't actually aware that anybody cared about the film really. So, and I think it had been ridiculed enough in the kind of like the news, you know, the newspapers and stuff at the time that like, he was like, well, here we are in the age of the internet. I'm sure it's the same now, you know, it can be worse. So he just never thought any more about it. I think that's all these things have kind of added to the allure and the kind of story of the film. Like, why did they do this? Like, why did they even bother like making it, and why is it so kind of arch and different tones from the, you know? So I think it's a fun wee kind of, I think you're right, probably watch once, even though I've watched it multiple times, but like watch once and kind of like, God, that's interesting, that's kind of a weird film history kind of thing about the 80s and the 80s slasher scene and stuff. And I think the whole thing with the Santa, you know, Killer Santa uprise against the first film's kind of interesting leading into this as well. But yeah, anyway, that's Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. So Gary, I thought what we'd maybe do is a wee Christmas special and then kind of an end of year wrap up. We'll maybe look at all the films we've talked about over the year since we came back starting to do the podcast fresh, and maybe just run them down and just go give it an eye or an up, a yes or a no, like whether we liked it or whether we
liked the film or the episode,
or whether we watch it again. Oh, the episode, Christ. I don't listen to the episodes, Gary.
Yeah, so we opened in March, I believe, with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, came diving out the doors. Look at that. What a return to form. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. For me, that's an aye.
Yes.
Or a yes. Yes. Are you yesing that as well, Gary?
That's a good one.
So that was followed quite swiftly by The Burning. Gary?
That's a neutral. Neither yen or no.
It's an iron, no, mate.
I'm
You
trying
don't
to
know how the
pick a
game
third
works.
option.
It's an iron up. Well, okay, you can do a third option. You can do a third option.
In the middle, aye. On the fence on that one.
Okay. Well, let's kind of say it's like a kind of, would you recommend it to somebody that you know liked the kind of films that we like, right? So for me, it's a definite aye or a yes.
Right. I'd recommend it.
Cool. All right. What was next, Gary?
Phantasm.
Oofed. That's an aye for me as well.
That's an aye for me.
Oofed.
Right.
Like that once I did. Oh crikey! Holy, look what's next, Gary. The Child.
This was a divisive one, yeah.
Oh, this is a nut for me. In fact, I would. Do you ever see that episode of Father Ted when they stand outside the cinema and they've got to tell people down with this sort of thing? Careful now.
Yeah.
You know, that would be me outside the cinema showing The Child. Oh
right.
no, don't go and see this. I would say.
Okay.
Personally, this is a nup for me.
I'd say watch it once.
I'd say get a pal who's watched it, me, and let them tell you what you think, and just don't watch it. That's fair enough.
After that, it was a Anthropophagus.
Oh yes, yup,
Yeah,
aye,
big
yep.
thumbs up from me.
Nice one. Oofed. I like that one. It's a wee tasty one. That one. Next up, we had Demons and Demons 2. Let's say we'll do that, right? Demons and Demons 2. Jeez, I wish we had 3 now.
Right.
I might say watch it once, but I'm definitely leaning towards the no side, I think, for Demons and Demons 2.
Yeah, it'd be a no from me.
Yeah, it's got some stuff, but yeah, I don't think it's worth it, to be honest. But yeah.
Okay, Zombie Flesh Eaters.
Oof, also known as Zombie 2. Yes, this is a wee cracker. This is. I enjoyed this probably more this time than I even did previously. So yeah, this would be a high. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard yes from both of us, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. August Underground, Gary. August Underground.
I'd have to say no to that one.
Yeah, I'd say no as well. Yeah, I don't think I could recommend it to anyone.
Under the Skin.
Yeah, I could recommend this. Yeah,
for sure.
I enjoyed going back to this again. This was another one that I hadn't really seen since my initial viewing at the cinema, and it held up. And actually, I thought I enjoyed it even more than I did before. August Underground, Mordom.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd really recommend it to anyone, just because it's so extreme. It's very niche, and you have to want to force yourself to watch it a wee bit because it's not that enjoyable. But aye.
Yeah, I'd say the same. It'd be a no probably for me. I could. There's certain friends that I could maybe recommend it to, but.
Right.
But
I respect folk for going there.
Yeah,
kind of.
Yeah,
like that's a wee
exactly.
badge of honor. Yeah.
It feels like you almost have to kind of find it or kind of come to it yourself, and then just happen to meet other people who have seen it, and you're like,
right,
yeah, that was messed up. You know what I mean? Like, if we hadn't been doing, like, if you'd recommended to me outside of the podcast, I probably would have checked it out. Right. But yeah, in general, I think it's a tough one. I think that's the same with all the August Underground, to be fair. But
okay, American movie.
This is a hard yep for me. This was, this was a very good one.
Yep, fantastic. Strong yes.
Indeed.
Recommendation from me.
Yep. David Lynch's Blue Velvet.
Again, thumbs up.
Yeah, I definitely didn't enjoy it this time as much as I remembered enjoying it, but yeah, I'd still say especially if you're any kind of fan of David Lynch, I mean, I think even if you're not, I think you could this is probably one of his more mainstream films that you could recommend to most people. It's pretty high up there.
Okay, Eraserhead.
Oh, that's an interesting one. We were just talking about Lynch there, obviously. I mean, it's a yes for me. I enjoyed it. Recommending it to people, it'd be 50-50 depending on what I thought they were into. You know what I mean? Because I think it's quite a like a weird film, right? So, I mean, if I knew people were into the same type of movies as us, I could definitely recommend it to them.
Yeah, must see in terms of cult movies, but not one of his more successful ones in my opinion. But I still recommend it. I think you need to see it.
Black Mass of the Nazi Sex Wizard. The new Rob Zombie album. For me, it's a no, and that's coming from someone who I think, again, it would be hard. I would like to recommend the other 3 films, but similar to the August Underground stuff, it's quite difficult to recommend to a lot of people. But I enjoyed them. The first 3, but this one wasn't for me up there.
Cool. I'd recommend it. I'd say it's a good one for Christmas Day for all the fam.
This is your favourite Christmas horror film. I get it. It's fine, fair enough. Fucking weirdo.
Okay, Halloween 4.
Oh, yes.
Ton of
yes.
Michael Myers.
Yes. Yeah. I would recommend this.
I couldn't recommend this personally. I think I'd say watch another Halloween first.
Yeah. Fair enough, man. Well, yeah, first, sure,
Right.
but Cannibal Ferox.
Yes, I'd recommend this to people who are familiar with the kind of aesthetic the delves in.
Yes, I'd agree. I would say that you could almost get away with recommending this to people who you might not recommend it to. Recommend Cannibal Holocaust to. I feel it's got a slightly lighter tone, maybe, in a lot of it. But yeah, I enjoyed this film.
Although the animal cruelty is going to turn people off, though. But
yeah, it is. But I think that's heavier in Cannibal Holocaust. But I mean, interestingly, does this have like a, an animal friendly cut? You know how Cannibal Holocaust has that stuff?
I don't think it has an official animal friendly one, but
Right,
I think the UK one is still very slightly cut. So you could just watch that one if you want, but it doesn't have a director approved. I think recut thing.
Sure, but yeah, cool. No, I don't think it adds anything to the film anyway. So I think you could happily watch it without it. So yes, that's for yes from me.
Return of the Living Dead.
Yes, for me. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this obviously quite recently. Again, I think it's a fun one to watch with friends. For all the kind of letdowns we had, we both said about the latter half of it, I still think it's almost an essential zombie film if you're into zombie flicks.
Cool, yeah. I'd recommend this one. Yes.
Yeah. Cool, Gary. So that's quite a lot of episodes we've got out this year. Could I ask you to maybe pop your favourite on the lines? Just to pick one there that you would have been your favourite film, not your favourite episode.
That we've done of all these movies. It's got to be Blue Velvet, I think. American movie is probably my favourite, but I think Blue Velvet stands out as just like, in terms of filmmaking, that's on another level. Yeah. I was more thinking of his favourite film, but I think I can't really disagree with you with Blue Velvet on that list. But for me, it was going to be American Movie as well for my favourite film. That was a real kind of eye opener for me. I'd never heard of it before, and really, it's definitely made it into kind of a top list of some of my favourite films. And I would happily recommend that to someone, especially people that are kind of in the filmmaking kind of frame of mind or business or whatever. And even those that aren't, because there's so much fun in that film and heart. Fantastic.
Cool, man. Cool.
So that'll do it for this Christmas special. If you would like more of this content, please make sure you have subscribed on YouTube, like the video, and hit the notification bell.
So thanks for listening. I've been Simon.
I've been Gary.
It's Garbage Day!
It was a nightmare.